Welcome to Monterey County Pops Pros Teach. I'm Carl Christensen, the music director and conductor of Monterey County Pops. Our orchestra of fully professional musicians presents free concerts of pops and patriotic music throughout Monterey County. During the school year, we visit local schools and conduct clinics and workshops for student musicians in the afternoon. And in the evening, we perform together in a free concert for their community. We are committed to mentoring young musicians, and since we have not been able to visit schools since March, we have created this series of instrumental clinics. They will be broadcast once a week on Comcast Channel 24, and they will also be posted on our website, montereycountypops.org, along with downloadable exercises, tips, and other print material. Bienvenido a Monterey County Pops Pros Teach. Soy Carl Christensen, director musical de Monterey County Pops. Nuestra orquesta de músicos totalmente profesionales presenta conciertos gratuitos de música ligera y patriótica en todo el condado de Monterey. Durante el año escolar visitamos escuelas y realizamos clínicas y talleres para estudiantes músicos por la tarde, y por la noche presentamos un concierto conjunto para su comunidad. Para nosotros, la educación musical de jóvenes músicos es muy importante, y como no hemos podido visitar escuelas desde marzo, hemos creado esta serie de clínicas instrumentales. Se transmitirán una vez a la semana en el canal 24 de Comcast y también se publicarán en nuestro sitio web montereycountypops.org junto con ejercicios, consejos y otro material impreso descargable. And now, please enjoy our Clarinet episode presented by our Associate Principal Clarinet, Jeff Gallagher. Y ahora disfruten de nuestro episodio de clarinete presentado por nuestro clarinete principal asociado, Jeff Gallagher.
Hey everybody, my name's Jeff Gallagher and I'm a clarinetist for the Monterey County Pops Orchestra. I've been asked to speak with you today about some of the intricacies and history of the clarinet, and I'm really looking forward to doing that with you. In fact, I've been playing clarinet since the 5th grade, and I picked it because I just loved the way it sounded, and it didn't hurt any that they needed clarinets for the band in 7th grade. So my teachers kind of pushed me that direction as well. I have an undergraduate degree in music education, and I have my graduate work is actually in music performance. I love to teach, I love to play. Locally, I play a lot. I've learned over the years other instruments besides clarinet, like saxophone and flute and oboe and bassoon. So I get hired a lot by theaters in the area, in addition to the orchestras that I play for. It turns out that the more instruments you play, the more your chances are to perform, which is pretty fun when you stop and think about it. I play in the Santa Cruz Chamber Players, I play in the Ensemble Monterey, I perform with the Santa Cruz Symphony, and of course I love playing with the Monterey County Pops because I know when I get a call from them it's going to be lots of fun. You may find the history and development of the clarinet an interesting topic, and in fact there are about 4 prominent schools of clarinet sound in the world today, though you might guess, and accurately, that there are as many different clarinet sounds as there are clarinet players. We all try to add our individual personalities and sound to the instrument. But the 4 major schools that you will learn about if you have conversations with clarinetists, the first one is the German school, which plays a kind of a clarinet called the Euler system, and it can have up to 27 keys, which is a lot. Clarinet players describe the German school of sound as a dark and compact, very well in tune sound, but is very difficult to play softly. So when you hear a German player, they have a tendency to play everything pretty loudly. And some of the common players, if you find on YouTube or on recordings that play with the German sound, are Karl Leister and Sabine Meyer. The next major school or national style of clarinet playing is called the French school. That's the system that we all play here in America called the BAME system, and it has either 16 or 17 keys. If you're playing a bass clarinet, you have 17. If you're playing all the rest, it's 16. That description usually is clear and bright, maybe too bright to some people, and there's usually a result of this kind of style is a very large dynamic range. French players can play very softly to very, very loudly. Now, what I mean by French players is that school or that style of playing. It doesn't mean they're from France, right? The third school is the Italian school, which also uses the BAME system clarinet, which we all use here in America. The Italian school has a long, long history of operatic performances and tradition. And so we describe the Italian sound as very voice-like, very lyrical, or in a very expressive and musical way over virtually every other consideration. The players who play with the Italian school sound, a couple of them that I can mention, Ernesto Cavallini, if you hear any of that music, or Alessandro Carbonari. Play with the Italian school. And last but certainly not least, there's the American school of sound, which is kind of a hybrid. We're late to the scene. All the other schools have been around a little bit longer. We use, of course, the BAME system clarinet, as I mentioned before, and we describe, well, the way that can be described is it has a strong French influence, but we're a little more open sounding, a little wider sounding, maybe a little darker, and we like to use a lot more air pushing through the instrument, and you'll hear me talk more about that later, and that gives us a little more flexibility. And of course, the American sound is unique because there's this connection to jazz, which is new in the world at the time. And we have film music to consider as well. So Americans really led the way there. There is a long list of American school players. Larry Combs, who is the principal of the Chicago, Richard Stoltzman, who's teaching on the East Coast now, Charles Niedlich, who is in New York, and you maybe heard of Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw. All of these clarinetists are part of what we call the American sound or the American school. I'd like to take a few moments to talk about the various types of clarinets that are commonly played today. In the band, we play very often, depending on the piece of music and how big the band is, the E-flat clarinet, the B-flat clarinet, which is the one you and I are playing most of the time today. There's also the E-flat alto clarinet, the B-flat bass clarinet, the E-flat contralto clarinet, and on some occasions, the B-flat contrabass clarinet. Now, you may be curious about why they're in different keys, and the truth is it's very simple to think about. If you're playing an instrument and you play your C, and you walk over to a piano and that sound is a piano C, then that instrument is in C. If you play your C on a clarinet and you walk over to the piano and it's the piano's B flat, then you're playing a clarinet in B flat. Likewise, if I play my C on a clarinet and I walk over to the piano and it's an A on the piano, that means my clarinet is in A. So it's really very straightforward way to think about it, I think. In the orchestra, we have maybe a slightly different set of clarinets to play. There's the little E-flat clarinet. Sometimes we're required to play the C clarinet, B-flat clarinets, A clarinets, and you'll see a B-flat bass clarinet in the orchestra an awful lot. And I'd like to mention also two very old clarinet members of the family called the basset horn, which is an F, and the basset clarinet, which is in A. You don't see those too often, but Mozart, the composer Mozart, was very fond of them. And so every once in a while, when you listen to Mozart recordings, you'll hear either a basset horn or a basset clarinet. And it sounds like an alto clarinet, but it's really, really beautiful. I thought I'd demonstrate some of the various clarinets that I just mentioned of the clarinet family, and so you can get a feel for their characteristic sounds. I'm holding one of the smallest clarinets in the clarinet family called the E-flat clarinet. And I'll start on the lowest note. Not very low, right? It's a small instrument, it's going to be high. This is how it sounds in the orchestra. As you can tell, you only need one in an orchestra of 112 players. It's going to be well heard. Next, I'd like to demonstrate the sound of the A clarinet by playing a typical solo that would be used on the instrument. I'll now play the lowest part of the instrument so that you can hear the contrast between the A clarinet and the E flat clarinet. Next, I'd like to demonstrate the A clarinet by playing one of the most famous pieces of clarinet music ever written by a composer named Mozart, specifically for this instrument in the key of A. And now I'll play for you the low range of the clarinet so you can compare it to the low range of the E flat clarinet. Much deeper. Now I'll be demonstrating the B flat clarinet, which I'll bet all of you are also playing. That was an exercise by a composer named Alfred Uhl, and I'll play for you now the low end of this instrument so you can compare it to the other two. Next, I'd like to demonstrate the B-flat bass clarinet, which is used in a lot of orchestras and a lot of bands. You'll hear it sound an octave lower than the B-flat clarinet I just demonstrated. And I'd like to play the low end of this instrument so that you can compare it to the other clarinets I played. Very nice, dark, rich sound. I hope you'll agree. Let's take some time right now to look at the various kinds of equipment that are available for you as you continue your clarinet playing. Clarinets themselves can be made out of plastic or rubber, or sometimes it's called ebonite, which is a form of rubber. You can also find wood instruments, and nowadays there are a lot of carbon composites as well, very space-age clarinets out there. Some of the common, or maybe best, kinds of clarinets that you'll see available are by Buffet, by Selmer, LeBlanc, Yamaha, and Bundy. When you play clarinet, you also need a mouthpiece. Usually they're hard rubber. They can also be glass, which is more common in the jazz world. There's very few metal clarinet mouthpieces, but you see them all over the place on saxophone. For now, stick to hard rubber mouthpieces. The best names to find out there for mouthpieces are Van Doren, Selmer, Yamaha, and LeBlanc. Gotta have reeds. It's a single reed instrument. You can buy cane, which is of course a plant, or you can buy synthetic reeds. I know players who use both. Common manufacturers of good reeds are Van Doren, Rico, Alexander, and Gonzalez. Many clarinet players just keep playing until they find one they like, and that's pretty normal. Also, to play clarinet, you need a ligature, and when you buy, which is the piece of metal or rubber that holds the reed onto the mouthpiece itself. And when you buy a ligature, you always get a mouthpiece cap because they have to fit together. And the mouthpiece cap, of course, protects the ligature. The common manufacturers of ligatures and mouthpiece caps are Van Doren, Bonad, LeBlanc, Rovner, and you see an awful lot of them out there that just don't have any name on them at all. And if they work for you, that's fine, but I kind of avoid those. And when you screw down the ligature onto the mouthpiece cap, the screw might be closer to your chin or away from your chin. And if it's away, it's called an inverted ligature. Some tips I have for you. You know, I buy new instruments, I buy used instruments. It just all depends on the quality. Used can be an excellent value, especially for wood instruments, because that means they've been played on for a while and there's less likelihood that they will crack. Wood instruments can crack. My advice is never spend money unless you're sure there's a reasonable return policy. It doesn't matter how good the deal is if you hate the clarinet. You really need, before you try one, you need to make sure you can give it back. I recommend purchasing only new mouthpieces, ligatures, and reeds. They don't age well. Just stick to new, always on those. And if you play outside a lot, which is happening a lot these days, try to have what I call a picnic instrument, which is a hard rubber or plastic one. If you have a great wood instrument, you'd rather not expose it to harsh sunlight. When we try new mouthpieces, we usually try 3 at a time because they're hugely different. And if you just try one, you really want to compare that brand with 2 others so you can pick your favorite of the 3. This is super important, by the way. If someone asks to play your instrument, the answer is no. Do not let other people play your instrument. Think of it as your toothbrush. If someone wants to borrow your toothbrush, the answer is no, go get your own toothbrush. So you protect your instrument. This might seem obvious to some, but let's say it out loud. Some mouthpieces work with certain reeds really well, and they don't work very well with other reeds. That's why you see a lot of clarinet players trying new reeds all the time to see. This is normal, it's expected, do not worry about that. If you find there are certain reeds you really like and other reeds you can't stand, perfect, that's exactly right. Stick to the ones that you like. And I also wanted to mention that maybe you buy boxes of reeds like I do, which is usually a group of 5 or 10. And in fact, if you buy a certain strength, like a 3 or a 3.5, or maybe a 2.5, the manufacturer deliberately adds slightly stiffer and slightly softer reeds to that box. They do it on purpose. They don't want them to be all the same. So they're always assuming that you might want to have a slightly softer reed if you're playing indoors, or a slightly stiffer reed if you're playing outdoors. So you may notice a lot of variation when you buy reeds, and that's the way they planned it. Common mistakes or errors that players will perform. Sometimes we see a lot of puffy cheeks. That's a mistake. You want always your cheeks to be very natural and relaxed, and your chin has to be flat. And to check that, we don't need the whole clarinet. In fact, we just need the mouthpiece and the barrel. And if you would take yours right now and do the same thing, when we play just the mouthpiece and the reed, of course, and the ligature and the barrel together, we get what's called a concert F sharp or a clarinet G sharp, and it should sound like this. Go ahead and try that. Now, if your chin isn't flat enough or you're not pushing enough air, it can be all over the place like this. We don't want any of that. It should be a nice, pure sound. And you'll notice the corners of my mouth are back. They're not smiling, they're back, and my chin is flat and I'm not puffing my cheeks. I wanted to make sure also that you knew about a hand position. It's easy to get very tense because you're worried about doing a good job. But the way I remind myself is I let my hand just literally fall to the side. Just totally forget about it. Don't even think about your hand. Maybe loosen it up a little bit. And then don't move it and bring it right up to the clarinet. And then do the same thing with your other hand. Don't drop the clarinet, of course. Let it relax completely. Don't try to make your fingers do anything. And then bring it back up. And then you have your fingers are literally as relaxed as they can be when you're playing clarinet. And if you're forgetting, if you feel tense, just relax again a little bit and then bring it right back again. And you have a very natural curve. And that really can help you play with the best possible sound. And we're always going for the best possible sound. As you know, clarinetists who play with a beautiful sound tend to play very well in tune. We work on those together at the same time.